There's something strange about living with Parkinson's long enough. Sometimes the disease changes before you realize that you've changed with it. You don't wake up one Tuesday morning and think, well, apparently we've entered Parkinson's 2.0. It's usually much quieter than that. Maybe something you used to do automatically suddenly requires concentration. Maybe your medication's still working, but the good window isn't quite as forgiving as it used to be. Maybe Carmen notices something about me 6 months before I'm willing to admit it, which, for the record, is incredibly annoying when she's right. Well, today I want to give you 7 signs that your Parkinson's may be changing before you even realize it. And stay with me because number 7 is the one I think we dismiss the most often because on the surface, it doesn't even look like a Parkinson's symptom, but it can change your entire day.
Welcome to Living with Parkinson's. The good, the bad, and the reality. Real talk, real life, real community with Bryce Perry. Let's begin.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the broadcast. I'm Bryce, and I was diagnosed with Parkinson's at the age of 40, and I've been living with it now for almost 16 years. Now, before we start, this is not 7 signs that your Parkinson's is definitely getting worse. Parkinson's fluctuates. Sleep matters, stress matters, medication timing, illness, digestion, that all matter. What I'm talking about today are patterns worth noticing because sometimes our everyday life changes so gradually that we adapt before we recognize what we're even adapting to. So let's get right into this because this is exciting. So number 1 is probably the best example of exactly what I just said. And number 1 is very sneaky. You know, something that used to happen without you thinking about it suddenly requires instructions. Walking, getting out of the car, turning around, putting on a jacket, getting up from the chair or rolling over in bed. You don't necessarily think my Parkinson's has changed. You think, hang on, let me get myself organized here. And that phrase right there, let me get myself organized. Oh my gosh, I know that phrase. Because Parkinson's has this wonderful little habit of turning automatic movement into a committee meeting. Your brain used to say stand up, and your body stood up. But now sometimes it feels more like, okay, feet underneath me, lean forward, hands here, 1, 2, 3. Everybody agree? Motion carried. And up we go. Parkinson's affects automatic movement. And as that movement becomes slower or smaller, things that, once happened without much conscious effort, they now require your attention. And here's why I think we miss this change. Because we compensate. We grab the armrest. We pause before turning. We stop carrying something while walking. We give ourselves an extra second getting out of the car. And all are really reasonable adaptations. But after 6 months of doing them, you can completely forget that you didn't always have to. And that's why one of the best questions you can ask yourself isn't, can I still do it? It's, does it take more thought than it used to? Because those are 2 very different questions. You may still be completely independent. You may still be doing everything. But if your brain has quietly taken manual control over things that used to run on autopilot, well, that information is worth noticing. All right, let's move on to number 2. And this one's huge. Okay, you take your medication. It still works. You still get an on period. But something about the timing starts to change. Maybe it takes longer to kick in. Maybe it doesn't carry you quite as long or as comfortably to the next dose. Maybe you start looking at the clock 20 minutes earlier than you used to. And you don't even realize you're doing it. And I know this one extremely well. There is a particular relationship you develop with clocks when you've had Parkinson's for a long time. Normal people look at clocks and think, oh, it's 2:15. We look at it and we think 2:15. Okay, I took my pills at 12:37. That means technically, suddenly you're doing pharmaceutical calculus. As Parkinson's changes over time, medication effects can become less steady and off periods can become more noticeable. Off time can include, stiffness, slowness, freezing, fatigue, anxiety, pain, and even brain fog. But again, be careful. One bad medication day does not automatically mean progression. A heavy meal, constipation, poor sleep, stress, or any even a routine change can affect how you feel and sometimes how the medication seems to work. So what we're doing is we're looking for patterns. Maybe last year your dose reliably carried you nearly 3 hours. Now you consistently notice symptoms returning earlier. Well, that is worth writing down, tracking, and talking to your neurologist about that. And not because something terrible is happening, but because your treatment needs to follow you. Remember, progressive disease that we have, that means we need to have a progressive treatment plan. You should not have to spend your entire day chasing your medication around with a stopwatch. That's the truth. My goodness. And if you ever do that, say me too in the comments so I don't feel so alone. And you know what? And keep watching because the next few changes become much easier to blame on getting older. But before we finish, I'm going to give you one simple question you can ask yourself that may tell you more about change than almost anything on this list. So stay tuned to that. All right, let's move into number 3. There's walking, and then there's Parkinson's walking, and they're not the same activity. Eventually, you may notice you're thinking about surfaces, corners, curbs, doorways, crowds, someone walking behind you, how fast the person beside you is moving, whether the floor is shiny, whether that rug is about to become your mortal enemy. You used to walk across a room because something you wanted was on the other side. Now the room itself has become part of the assignment. Shuffling, shorter steps, freezing, and balance problems can be part of Parkinson's. And change in gait and balance can emerge or become more noticeable over time. But one of the earliest clues for me isn't necessarily falling, it's caution. Okay? You begin planning movement differently. You turn more carefully. You leave more space. You hesitate before stepping off a curb. Or maybe you stop walking and talking at the exact time, right? Because one of those jobs needs your full attention. And that doesn't mean defeat. Actually, sometimes adapting is smart. But again, notice what's changed. Because I can still walk doesn't tell the whole story. How much mental energy does walking now cost you? And that's a better question. I'm going to tell you a funny story. So we were in Louisiana this weekend. Had an amazing time at LSU. Say hi to everybody we met out there. It was just beautiful. But we were going through customs, and Carmen and I walked up to the customs agent sitting at the desk. We handed over the passports. He opened the passports. He looked at. We were standing right there. He looked at us and said, "Where are you going? Louisiana. What for? Parkinson's convention or conference. How long are you going to be there? 3 or 4 days." Okay, great. And he hands back the passports. Carmen grabs the passport. She turns doof, and starts walking down the hallway. Me, on the other hand, well, Parkinson's decided that would be a great time for me and the customs agent to have a stare down, a staring contest. I'm standing there just staring at him, and I can't move. And I'm just looking at him, and he's looking at me. And then all of a sudden, Carmen realizes that I'm not moving. She turns around, starts coming back, and she's like, "Are you okay? What can I do?" And the customs agent was so nice. He's like, "Take your time, sir. Take your time, sir." Then I realized I was standing there with one foot in Canada and one foot in the United States, and I just wanted to turn around and go. I mean, it was time to go, but I couldn't decide which way to turn. Isn't that wild? I couldn't decide. Should I turn right and go this way, or should I turn left and go this way? Just turn around, Bryce. Just turn around. Right? My brain's like, just turn around. And my body's going like, huh? Can't hear you. Can't hear you. And, it was wild. And that doesn't happen to me often. But in those moments, I'm like, unbelievable. And that's that goes back to 1, 2, and 3, that are these things I've been talking about, is that you have to deliberately start thinking about your next move, where automatically we didn't have to do that before. And that's kind of an example of what I mean by the progression, maybe changing, things getting a little different. And totally off topic, but just to throw this in there, for those of you that are always worried about maybe what you're going to look like, you'll be embarrassed if you're in public and go out in public. It wasn't a big deal. The custom agent was fine. My wife was fine. Nothing happened. It was just a moment in time where it was like, that was really strange. Didn't like it. Don't get me wrong. Didn't like it, but it was strange. Anyway, let's keep moving on here to number 4. And this is another one. Number 4 is another one that can sneak up on you. And it's nobody says, "Bryce, your Parkinson's speech pattern appears to have changed." They say, "Sorry?" Then again, "Sorry? What did you say?" And eventually you start thinking everybody around you needs hearing aids. which at our age statistically may seem like a decent theory, but sometimes it's really us. Parkinson's can make speech quieter, more monotone, less clear, or harder to initiate. And people with Parkinson's do not always recognize the magnitude of those changes themselves. And this happened to me. You feel like you're talking at a perfectly normal level. Meanwhile, Carmen is 3 feet away going, "What?" And you repeat it at the exact same volume because apparently the first unsuccessful attempt deserves a sequel. And she still can't hear me. Then I feel like I'm yelling at her and she still can't hear me. Speech changes are worth bringing up early because speech language therapy can help with communication, and swallowing changes could also be discussed with your healthcare team. And this is another reason why I'm telling you not to use this list as some sort of doom meter, okay? A changing symptom can mean there's something that we can work on, and that matters. Now, let me interrupt myself literally for 10 seconds. If this video is helping you recognize something that you hadn't connected before, please hit the like button, and not for me. There is somebody sitting at home right now wondering why something suddenly feels harder and thinking that they're the only one. And that little click on that like button lets YouTube put this conversation in front of them. And that's it. Okay, let's move along. Number 5. Now, this might be the biggest misconception about Parkinson. We watch the movement symptoms: tremor, stiffness, walking, dyskinesia. But sometimes the thing that changes first isn't movement at all. Maybe you're more constipated. Maybe your sleep is worse. Maybe fatigue hits harder. Maybe anxiety starts appearing in places it didn't before. Maybe blood pressure becomes unpredictable. Maybe thinking feels slower. Parkinson's can involve a wide range of non-movement symptoms, including those like we've talked about 1,000 times: sleep problems, constipation, fatigue, pain, mood changes, cognitive difficulty, bladder issues. These can be every bit as disruptive as the visible movement symptoms. And this is where people can get fooled because you think, my Parkinson's movement looks about the same. Great. But Parkinson's doesn't only live in the movement department. Apparently, it has an all access badge. It wanders around. It goes through your digestive department, the sleep department, the mood department, the bladder department, brain fog department. No appointment required. So periodically take inventory of things other than just your movement, because sometimes they'll tell a story that your tremor doesn't. Okay, number 6. Your brain has less room for 2 things at once. Now, this one has become so real for me. Doing one thing, fine. Doing 2 things, welcome to negotiations. Walking while answering a question, cooking while somebody's talking to you, getting dressed while trying to remember what you need to bring, following a group conversation with 3 people talking. Eventually, you find yourself saying, "Hang on, let me finish this first." And that sentence can be a clue. Parkinson's can affect attention. It can affect your planning and your processing speed and your executive function. Divided attention situations can become particularly difficult, and fatigue, anxiety, and poor sleep can make it even worse. Now, that doesn't automatically mean dementia, and I want to say that clearly. A brain that processes information more slowly is not the same thing as a brain that is disappearing. Sometimes we simply need more time and less noise. I used to think multitasking was doing several things simultaneously. Now, multitasking means forgetting several things simultaneously. Much more efficient. But seriously, notice if your world has become increasingly dependent on doing one thing at a time, because that information is so useful. It may mean changing the environment, or reducing distractions, or breaking tasks into small steps, or even just simply giving yourself more time. Not beating yourself up because your brain doesn't enjoy rush hour anymore. Just give it more time. And that's actually a perfect place for Carmen, because sometimes the person living with Parkinson's adapts so gradually that we genuinely don't see the difference, but the care partner does. So it is now time for Carmen's Care Partner Corner, and here's what Carmen asked me to read to you today. Hi, everybody. Here's what I think care partners sometimes see before the person with Parkinson's does. It's not necessarily one dramatic new symptom, it's the little workarounds. Maybe they stop carrying their coffee while they walk. Maybe they start sitting down to put their pants on. Maybe they avoid a certain staircase. Maybe getting ready to go somewhere takes 20 minutes longer. Maybe they stop wanting to go somewhere that requires a lot of walking. And if I say, hey, I've noticed you're doing this differently, Bryce usually says, no, I'm not. And then apparently we begin the courtroom portion of our marriage. But I've learned something important. My job isn't to prove that he's changed. My job is to tell him what I'm seeing without making him feel like I'm studying him. There is a difference between you can't do that anymore and I've noticed that seems harder lately. Have you noticed it too? One feels like something is being taken away, while the other starts a conversation. And sometimes I think care partners need to remember that too. We're watching someone we love adapt to something they've never asked for. So, yes, notice things. Write down if there's a pattern. Bring important changes to the appointments, but leave room for dignity because nobody wants to feel like their spouse has become their full time surveillance camera. Oh, and here's Carmen's Carmenism of the day. Notice the change. Don't become the change police. Love you guys. Back to Bryce. Wow. See, that is exactly the problem with inviting Carmen into the show. Because she says something sensible and now I have to follow it. And unfortunately, she's right. Again. All right. Okay, here we go. Number 7. And I saved this one for last because I think it ties everything else together. Okay. And number 7 is the same day costs you more than it used to. Now, that's the one, isn't it? Not can you still do it? Ask, what does it cost me now? And that question changed how I look at Parkinson's. Maybe you can still go to the grocery store, but afterwards, you're finished for 2 hours. Maybe you can still go for dinner, but now you have to plan your entire afternoon around having enough energy. Maybe you can still travel, but it takes you 2 days to recover. Maybe you can still mow the lawn, cook the meal, go to the grandkids' games, attend the event, but the bill arrives afterwards. And that is a change. Fatigue and Parkinson's can affect movement and thinking, and symptoms can fluctuate with sleep, stress, and medication state, and other factors. And I think this is where a lot of us get ourselves into trouble. We measure ability in yes or no. Can I do it? Yes. Therefore, nothing changed. But Parkinson's isn't that binary. I can do it, but what does it cost? That's the difference. Maybe the thing itself hasn't disappeared, but maybe your margin has. Maybe you may have adapted without even realizing it. You schedule fewer things in the day, or you leave earlier, or you build in rest. You choose the closest parking spot. You sit down more often, or you turn down invitations because somewhere inside you already calculated what it's going to cost. And none of that means you're giving up. Actually, I think understanding our new margin is how we keep going and doing more of the things that matter. Because once you recognize the cost, you can plan for it. You can rest before instead of only collapsing afterwards. You can schedule more important things during your better medication windows. You can tell your family, I want to come, but I may need to leave early. You can stop using yesterday's body as the measuring stick for today's body. And that one took me a long time. So, what do we do with this? Well, here's what I do not want you doing after this video. I don't want you walking around your house with a clipboard thinking, oh my God, I paused before putting my socks on. Stage 4. No. Parkinson's progression is highly individual and symptoms can fluctuate substantially. No single observation tells you where you are or what happens next. What I want you to do, though, is start noticing those patterns. Ask yourself, what takes more thought? What takes more time? What wears off earlier? What costs more energy? What is somebody who loves me noticing? And maybe once a month, write these things down. Track them, not obsessively, but just enough. So when your neurologist asks, so how have things been? You don't say what we all say, fine. Fine is medically useless. Fine tells them nothing. Give them examples. My medication seems to wear off 20 minutes sooner. I'm freezing more often in doorways. My wife says my voice is softer. I can still grocery shop, but now I need time to sleep afterwards. And that will give your healthcare team something that they can actually work with. Now, I want to hear from you. Which one of these seven did you recognize first? And not necessarily today, but in your Parkinson's journey. Was it movement requiring more thought, medication changing, walking, voice, non motor symptoms, multitasking, or realizing the same activity suddenly costs you more? Put that in the comments, please, because I guarantee you somebody else is going to read your answer and think, wait, me too. And that's why this community matters. All right, you made it this far. You've unlocked today's Brycism. It's a real simple one, so listen closely. If your Parkinson's needs this much management, the least it could do is pay rent. That's it. That's it. Don't fear every change. Notice it, talk about it, adapt where you need to, get help where help exists, and then get back to living. Because you know what? You have Parkinson's, but Parkinson's does not have you. And there you go. And until next time, I want you to keep showing up. I want you to keep being real. And most importantly, I want you to keep doing life today. I love you so very much, and I'll see you on the next episode.